Thank everyone coming tonight. I didn't think there'd be anybody. Yeah.
And nobody brought hot chocolate or donuts.
Yeah. Well, the road's pretty clear. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully Marla can join us here, but let's start with the roll call. Let's start down here with Dave.
David Foley, here.
Gary Israel.
Vance Garwood.
Peter Fox.
Clint Tynert.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go ahead then and look at the minutes from January 21st.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion to accept the minutes from the January 21st, 2025 Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals as presented.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion to approve the minutes from January 21st. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second by Dave. We have a motion, a second to approve the January 21st minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Let's move on then to the committee and staff report and any potential development report.
We have nothing to add tonight.
Hi, Marla, we can hear you now.
Go ahead, Les.
We have nothing to add tonight. The residential report, we've only had one building permit approved so far this year. We kind of had a run on permits late in the year because of the neighborhood revitalization program expiring. So there was a bit of a lapse. We now have a new program that just took effect a few days ago. So
Okay.
we're hoping that activity picks up again in February.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
None.
No? No. All right. Well, let's move on then. Go ahead and move to item 5 there. We'll go ahead and move on to item 5 now. It's a planning commission. We'd like to welcome everyone and lay out a few ground rules which will apply to each public hearing that we have tonight. It's important that you present any facts or views you have as evidence so that an informed recommendation can be made by the planning commission to the governing body for their final decision. By state statute, the governing body does not have to hold additional public hearings on these matters, although they may listen to whomever they wish. You will be asked if there's any new information which was not heard at these hearings. It's to everyone's advantage if you present all the necessary information at these hearings. For each case, after the city zoning administrator provides the commission with background information, I'll call upon each applicant. The public comments will be heard following the applicant. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The planning commission will then close the hearing to public comments and will consider the 14 factors on which to base their recommendation. During this time, the commission may direct questions to the applicant, the public, and/or city staff. You should be aware that the planning commission can recommend that the site be platted or replatted if necessary, and that a site plan may be required for approval. You should be aware that any uses permitted outright in district by the regulations can receive a zoning permit. Furthermore, if the applicant chooses to describe various features of the development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Official notices for these hearings were published on the City of Andover Municipal website on January 25th, 2025, and notices were mailed to the applicant and all real property owners of record in the areas of notification on January 24th, 2025. The record shows at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there's evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I'll declare that the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I'll ask the commission if any of them have received any ex parte, verbal or written communications prior to these hearings which they would like to share.
None.
None.
Okay. Let's go ahead then and move on to agenda item 5.1. Which is a public hearing on case Z-PUD 25-0001. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have any conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
I now call upon the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
Chairman, Planning Commission, you may recognize a lot of the text in this request for an amendment to the Cornerstone PUD. This relates to parcel 14. That's that area of duplexes on Savona Street, Stonecrest, where new duplexes are being built. A few months ago, you heard of similar amendment for those houses on the eastern edge of this development. This application requests to bring the western houses into an amendment to reduce the rear yard setbacks and the side yard setbacks in a similar fashion as those on the east. Phil Myers here from Boffman Company to represent the owner and applicant in this case.
Any question for Les? Question for Les? No. I'll now call upon the applicant to make his presentation on the request and any response to the zoning administrator report.
Evening, Phil Meyer with Boffman Company, agent for the applicant. In an effort to be efficient tonight, I will, in agreement with staff report, and I'll answer any questions you guys may have. I think this is round 2, and we've kind of been
Yeah.
through round 1, same thing.
This wasn't. yeah,
Didn't
just-
have all the answers first time around, so
Mhm.
we fixed a couple things and made it work.
Yeah, and this is an item that was brought up in subdivision last week that we went over quite extensively. And staff, they've addressed every issue that we brought up. Is that correct? Okay.
Any questions of Phil? Was it like 4 months ago maybe that we saw this last? Before subdivision, 3 months ago? I don't
3 or
remember how
4.
long ago it was.
I'd agree with that.
Something like that? Okay. April? Wow. Time flies.
Yeah.
No more questions of Phil? Mr. Meyer?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this case? No one willing to brave the roads, at least? Any written communication been received that we know of?
No, sir.
I assume no final comment from the applicant? Okay. Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions to clarify the information. The planning commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation. I'm not sure my voice is going to hold out
can
to
do
read
it.
these tonight, guys. I might need some help. That'd be great, just if you want to do this one, Peter.
Pretty sure I have the right one here. Okay, do staff items. Number 1, do adequate sewage disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist? Or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the change of zoning were approved? Staff says public water, sewer, and streets are available adjacent to the subject property and can be readily extended. Number 2, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted? Or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide needed rights-of-way, easements, building setback lines, and access control? Staff, subject property is already platted.
Concur.
Concur.
We're not requesting that. Number 3, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff, because the zoning districts of adjacent parcels, no landscape buffer would be required. Number 4, what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff has received no opposing opinions from residents. Number 5, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? No error is known to exist. Number 6, the subject property, I'm sorry, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? The subject property is an undeveloped parcel in the Cornerstone PUD that is suitable for the current uses allowed by the POD. This proposed amendment would just be adjusting the minimum setbacks and density.
Concur.
Number 7, is the length of time the subject property has been vacant or undeveloped, under its current zoning, a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, no.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 8, how reasonably well suited will the requested zoning change of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, the subject property would be well suited to the requested zoning change so long as the applicant can agree to the proposed requirements suggested in accordance with the IRC.
Concur.
Number 9, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these conditions? Staff, no.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 10, what are the current land uses, character, and condition of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the subject property is surrounded on 3 sides by the Cornerstone mixed-use PUD, and the surrounding area has a mixture of uses from single-family residential to multifamily residential.
Concur.
11, would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses which might have detrimental effects on nearby properties? And if so, how? Staff, the proposed use would not change the traffic or any other detrimental effects or have any other detrimental effects of the development. It is intended to increase the footprint and structure. I just have to say, the print here is very hard to read. It's the wrong color.
It is.
So bear with me. Having trouble here.
I could finish reading if you want.
That's all right. I got it.
Okay.
It's intended to increase the footprint a structure can occupy within the development.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 12, how would the requested zoning change conform with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted master plans and policies? Staff, the proposed uses are generally in conformance with the comprehensive plan by providing alternative housing options at a higher density.
Concur.
Number 13, do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect this zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in its evaluation? Staff, community development and AFR staff are supportive of the proposed amendment with the aforementioned modifications to the minimum distances between structures and the inclusion of building materials that meet IRC standards.
Concur.
And lastly, how would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff does not anticipate any detrimental effects or hardship to public health, safety, or welfare if there is a change to this subject property to the requested use. The staff opinion is qualified by comparing the existing permitted uses to the proposed uses.
Concur.
Concur.
Thank you, Peter. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our finding of fact, I'd remind the commission that that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it's based. And if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modify and approve, or disapprove or table the discussion?
Mr. Chairperson, after having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Gary Israel, move that we recommend to the governing board that case number Z-PUD 25-0001 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings 6, 8, 10, and 12 as recorded in the summary of this hearing.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
David Foley, second.
Second by Dave Foley. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. This case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at the regular meeting of March 11th, 2025. The recording of this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after their final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed at the Commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the city clerk for 14 days after tonight, which would be March 4th, 2025 at 4:30 p.m. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public street rights of way or specific statutorily excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council. All right, let's move on to 5.2. Now call agenda item 5.2, which is public hearing on case number Z-PUD 25-0003. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have any conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
None. I now call upon the city's zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission, this proposed planned unit development is a newly annexed parcel of land. Lies just north of Central Avenue here, north of City Hall, adjacent to the Crescent Lakes subdivision. It is a single-family residential planned unit development with rather large lots, but there are some dimensional standards within the PUD that would allow for smaller street right-of-ways, which would allow the houses to be somewhat closer to the street's interior to the subdivision. You can see on the plat that's on the screen up there that there are two existing streets that come out of the Crescent Lake subdivision that attach to Yorktown Parkway that are typical street right-of-way widths. But those streets interior are a little narrower right-of-way that accomplish the utilities and so forth by adjacent easements rather than within the street right-of-way. Again, this is a planned unit development. It has very called out uses for the reserves. It allows for some increased lot coverage. Again, these are large lots. I can't imagine the size of the lots that would warrant the 65% building coverage, but that's something that the developer wants some flexibility to be able to build houses that might be more like a patio home without a basement. That's just one of the options. Staff and subdivision committee have reviewed this and worked out some very minor changes with the applicant, and we're supportive of the application.
Any questions for staff, for Les?
No.
Marla, can you hear us? Do we have Marla still? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Well, feel free to speak up, Marla, if you have any questions, if you're there. Any questions?
I thought I'd wait to hear from you.
That sounds good.
Brian Lindeback is here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay.
Good evening, Brian Lindeback, MKEC Engineering, 411 North Webb Road on and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. And it is a fairly standard development. The only thing that's different about it is the things that Les mentioned, which is be your setbacks and your right of way. But with the way right of ways are being developed these days with utilities in the front yards by Evergy and others, we effectively have a 74-foot right of way up front, which is bigger than sometimes. So because you'll have 20-foot setback or 20-foot easements and then a 32-foot right of way. And the 32-foot right of way accounts for the standard type street, which is a 29-foot back to back. So in general, it's a pretty standard layout. We've done these elsewhere in the area. And I think, if Les will help me with this, I think we did part of Cornerstone with 32-foot right of way over by Andover Family Medicine. So it's not a unique new thing. It's a way a different way we handle right of ways.
Thank you. Question of the applicant?
We had discussed in committee drainage. And there was some question as to how that was resolved. Can you explain how you made the changes?
Yeah, we just added some clarity to the way the drainage is functioning. There's a new box culvert that would be installed with the Yorktown project. And so we created some information that went along with that as to how the hydrology will work and how it works today, both at Central, where the other box culvert is that's existing, and then the way we're handling it is we're not detaining that water, because it would be better in this unique scenario to let that water flow out before we impound it. There's a fairly large drainage basin, I think in the realm of 600 acres. And so with this be on the lower end, it would be better to let that water flow. So we're not draining into any other neighboring neighborhoods that we originally looked at possibly draining into the Crescent Lakes pond, but we chose not to due to complexities. And so we're draining straight south into the channel that's there.
It migrates into an already zoned floodplain by FEMA.
The portion of the property is, if you look on the hatch up there, that's where the limit, if you kind of see down on Central on the map up there on your screen, there's a crosshatch there. That's where the existing floodplain is today. But it for whatever reason, when FEMA did the mapping, they stopped it and didn't carry it up through there. But I'm certain in the future that mapping will continue up into Crescent Lakes and this development as well. So, but it'll be more defined at that time.
And I think this is also a final as well as a preliminary approval.
Yeah, I think that's a little later in the agenda, but yes, we're taking it to final. The developer does intend to build it as one phase, so that's the reason why we're bringing the final through as one project here. And of course, with all the construction activity with Yorktown, it'll lend well to getting the project put together at a similar time as the Yorktown project is unfolding.
Quite a bit of coordination between people here. It's a really
Yeah.
good job.
Yeah, we have a good team and a good team of Andover to work with, so it's been well.
So Les, staff and city engineer are all okay with the proposed drainage?
Yes, Gary, after the subdivision committee, the applicant's engineer made some adjustments to their drainage study and submitted those to the city engineer, and he agreed with the additional work that they had done. And I think we've satisfied all of those concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Brian?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this case? Yes, sir. If you would go up to the podium and state your name and address, that'd be great.
My name's Lyle Beatty. I live at 1106 East Woodstone in the Crescent Lakes subdivision. If I read things correctly, there's a side setback reduction for this particular project. Is that correct?
Correct. The PUD would allow 6-foot side yards,
And what's the normal?
8-foot.
8 foot? Well, personally, I'd object to the reduction. I could list off a number of reasons, including the reduction of privacy, the increased noise from one residence to the other, property value impact, reduced access for emergency vehicles, increased tension between neighbors. So I would personally object to that reduction. I also have a question as to that land in this project that lies between the Parkway and the Crescent Hills or Crescent Lake subdivision. Is there any planned use for that?
Which area again, sir? Sorry.
Between the new road
Yeah.
and the edge of Crescent Lakes?
Oh, going out towards Central. Is that what you mean? The Reserve A?
We're at the north end.
North
No.
end or south end? Sorry. Reserve D
The
or A?
the west side of the new highway and the edge of Crescent Lakes.
Those are all houses.
Lean?
Am I turned around?
No, that would be the east side. That's the west side.
The east side of Crescent Lakes, the west side of the Parkway.
Do you have another map that shows more detail beyond any other maps you could put up?
I don't believe so.
Looks like that's a hedgerow between Crescent Lakes and,
If you're talking about the reserve
No.
area, Reserve A,
So, yeah,
Mr. Chairman, if you want to collect up some of these questions, the applicant can probably best respond to those.
yeah. I think I just want to make sure we understand the area he's talking about.
I-
The only areas I see would be the one, Yorktown going to the south, past the last lot, which is an open, narrow strip, and then Reserve D up
Yeah,
there,
Reserve D.
north of Woodstone, might be what you're talking about. Would that be right?
Yes,
So you're talking about north of Woodstone that flows through into Crescent Lakes, that Reserve D right there?
yes,
Okay, we're on the same page. Just want to make sure I understood.
okay. I was just wondering if there were
Okay,
any plans for that.
okay, thank you. When we're done, we'll ask the applicant to come back up and visit about that.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, those
Okay.
were my comments.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for braving the roads. Anybody else? Yes, if you'd come up and state your name and address, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Lisa Land. I'm at 615 East Crescent Lakes Drive. And I will tell you right up front, this is my first time to dive this deep into reading a PUD preliminary or final. So I hope I've interpreted a lot of what I've said here correctly. As you consider these, I know one of the questions, we heard you go through this on the previous item, but the question was, would the proposed zoning change of the property allow land uses that might have detrimental effects on nearby properties? And I am very concerned about the plans here and how they're going to affect Crescent Lakes. In the development guidelines, it calls out patio home development while maintaining compatibility with adjoining existing residential land uses. And Crescent Lakes as a neighborhood that will touch directly to both this phase 1 and phase 2 of these there is a considerable change in density of homes when you go from Crescent Lakes into these. And again, as I read this, I read these are mostly lots that are going to average about 10,000 square foot per lot. Whereas in Crescent Lakes, 10,000 is about our minimum. And we have many of them that are a third of an acre. And that's getting up closer to 15,000 square feet. So we're talking about, 2/3 of the size of the lots. You've talked about narrowing down the streets between them. You've talked about narrowing the, what was it you were just talking about, Lyle, that
Setbacks.
the
Side yards.
sides, again, that 6-foot density, bringing them closer, calls out an exception that says the zoning lot coverage of 65%. What is the lot coverage that's called out in the subdivision regulations? I could not find that.
You'll speak to that, Les?
35% is what's called out in the regulations, and you're going to increase that from 35% to 65%? Is that what I'm understanding that correctly? And so again, I will speak to the density of these. These are not consistent neighborhoods. You will directly impact the value of our homes. Other exceptions, homes in Crescent Lakes all have 3-car garages. And I'm going to guess on patio homes, you're not going to have any homes with 3-car garages. That will be inconsistent. The design of our neighborhood allows for common areas, park-like settings, green belt areas within the neighborhood. Now, I understand you've got that section D at the very top that touches one of our green common areas. There's also a very narrow one in A, and then phase 2 has a couple of ponds that frankly, they're on the outside edge and probably outside people's fences that don't look like they're part of a designed community, which is what Crescent Lakes. We spend a lot of money to maintain the aesthetics of our neighborhood. We provide the amenities of green belts and fishing lakes, our clubhouse, we have swimming pools, we have playgrounds. None of those amenities are called out in either one of these developments. I don't even see fences to do adequate screening on the edges of these neighborhoods that will provide the security not only to these new neighborhoods, but also to Crescent Lakes, because as you've pointed out, you've now extended the streets, you're extending the sidewalks, and that flow comes right into our neighborhood. My other question is I wonder what the value and what the demand is in Andover, and I don't know where we're growing and what the need is, but I pulled up as a point in time today. I looked at the patio homes that are located at Heritage Commons in the Douglas and Yorktown, which to me is the same neighborhood, the same demand. Today, there are 9 homes for sale that have been on the market for 180 to 360 days on the market in the $300,000 to $76,000 range. There's an additional 7 homes that have been on the market in the 60 to 600 days range, days on the market in the 440 to 540 range. Crescent Lakes has 1 house on the market. Again, I'm a rookie at this, but that doesn't seem to me like the demand is for a high density, homes packed together, no green spaces, no amenities kind of neighborhood. Sounds to me like what people want in Andover is a neighborhood that feels more with green space, room for families, and room to be good neighbors. And good neighbors means good fences and enough space from your neighbors that you're not hearing their dogs bark. Because even in a good neighbor like ours, we get plenty of concerns and calls about dogs are barking too. And that just gets worse when you pack people in. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate your research. Anybody else? Ditto? Understand. Brian, would you come back up and discuss some of these things? So I heard lot density, lack of, or at least maybe not known what the amenities would be. The style of the homes, speak to that, whether patio homes, I know we know what's on paper, but what your thoughts are there? The lot coverage, the garages.
Sure.
Speak to those items. Would be great.
Well, I would just start off by saying this is a single family community. It's the same sort of development that's right next door. We're not putting in high density development. This is not high density at all. There's lots on here that are over half an acre. You know, I don't know if they looked at the plat that well, but this is a very conventional neighborhood as far as lot sizes. In fact, I think many of the lots are bigger than the ones that are directly abutting on the other side of the hedgerow. I've already looked at it. I drew up this plat, and I know that for a fact. So I know that there are significant lots in this development from a size standpoint. So I'd say from that standpoint, it's a very similar type of development now as to what type of houses they put on there, that is up to the owner of this property to do so. There's nothing in the zoning regs that dictate the style of the house. So I think it's important to note that if they choose to build a different style, that's quite all right. In fact, it's probably better to have more variety in our community than the same thing over and over again. So as far as market goes, it's up to the developer to decide how many houses he think he can sell. I mean, regardless of her research, it's up to the owner to put that risk out there. There's going to be millions of dollars sitting out there on this property in new houses. I'm certain that they won't build more than their wallet would allow from a cash flow standpoint. So,
Is there a minimum square footage on the plans?
we're working with an attorney on developing the new covenants for this development, and there certainly will be minimum standards for that, similar to Crescent Lakes and similar to many other communities here in Andover. I think, it's hard to say that, we're getting a little too excited about this, but I think it's just important to note that this is a residential neighborhood, just like Crescent Lakes is a residential neighborhood. It's not high density. As for the amenities, Reserve D is intended for amenity space of, and I've got a list of, you guys have seen the reserved language on the second page of the final plat, which I know we're not on the final plat yet, but it lists out all the different potential amenities in there. As for Reserve A, it's intended for a screening and conveyance of drainage. We also have reserves A and C. We've been working diligent to keep a landscape buffer despite Evergy's requests, but we've been able to coexist with the landscape buffer between Yorktown and the back sides of some of these houses and on the sides of some of these houses. So I think in short, we're talking apples and apples here. We're not talking apples and oranges. So I don't know that there's anything to get too alarmed about.
Brian, what's the smallest lot size in this PUD?
Well, the PUD calls out for 9,700 under the provisions. 9,750 is the smallest of it, that would be allowed. Let me look here.
7,000.
Gary, while you all were talking about these issues, I pulled up the county's GIS map just for reference. If you look at the Crescent Lakes lots numbered 49 through 53. Those are 12,900 square foot lots. The adjoining lots in the Vista Ridge, smallest is 11,900, 11,623. And the largest is 12,822. So I don't see disparity in lot sizes in the adjoining subdivision.
Lot 5, block 1 is an exception. Originally Reserve H that's next to it was part of that lot. And we cut it off and made it more of a buffer there along the road. So that is an exception. So we do need to make an exception on that specific lot. But the average of all the lots are much higher than that.
So if you had a 10,000 square foot lot with a 65% coverage, you'd have a 6,500 square foot house.
Well, probably 3,000 with the basement
Yeah.
Okay,
or so.
3,000 square foot house. That's a pretty good size house.
So Reserve D is about 6/10 of an acre. Is that right, Brian?
Yes, and
Up top?
I don't know what the future holds, but there's a parcel of land just north of it, that would likely go along with it, but those situations haven't been resolved yet with the city and the road project.
Can you recommend, you had mentioned that you have done a similar development in other parts.
Yeah.
Can you recommend?
Yeah, if you guys know where the waterfront is, there's a couple of parts of that development that have the same sort of lots and street rights away. So if you're, does anybody know where the Hartman building is? Hartman building, just north of the Hartman building is a cul-de-sac that has these same size lots, same types of road configurations. If anybody knows, what's that development? The Remington. We didn't do that development, but just over off of 21st, that has patio home lots in it. And again, those are larger houses on smaller lots. And, kind of the idea of having a patio home is lowering your maintenance of your yard area and having still a substantial house. So that's the idea that this developer is planning to do here. So, yeah.
But they can build any type of home they wish, not just patio home.
Yes, but I think that, they're going to do one or the other, but he's expressed that he wants to do patio homes on this development. So
Yep.
they'll be tailoring the covenants with maintenance and such to that degree.
Mhm.
Asking a question right there. So you're saying that developers for these lots, they're trying to go 80% patio homes, 100% patio homes in one of these lots?
The plan at this point, what the developer has told me is he wants to do all patio home lots. So, basically you'd have a covenant community where you have one mowing contract, one irrigation contract, and for the overall development. So yeah, that's the plan.
It's probably too early to say. There's a lot of land there. I mean, I assume not all this would be patio homes.
Yeah,
Right.
all these would be.
I'm talking about to the west.
Oh, that's a different project.
Yeah,
That's
that'll be
not ours.
completely different at some point.
Yeah, that's not our project. No.
Yeah.
Talking about east of Yorktown.
Right. East, right.
And then if we could address the issue of tree rows and so forth that the lady brought up earlier. I'm seeing some tree row definitions on the final PUD.
We're planning to do a landscape buffer, like I mentioned, in Reserve A and C. There's no requirement to have a buffer between the Crescent Lakes and this property. So there is an existing hedgerow. I don't believe anybody plans to remove any of those trees other than to put utilities in. So that's the plan, is to keep, I mean, we look at that as an amenity. Why would we want to remove an amenity? So that is and there's some of those trees that would be over the property line. So I don't know that 100% of them are on this property, but a large majority of those trees are, the trunk line is on this property.
Clint, to that notion, if you look at the details on that row of lots that abuts the hedgerow, there is a 20-foot drainage easement that is 20 feet off of the property line, which preserves that hedgerow from utility encroachment.
Right, I did see that. And north of that, it shows 35-foot drainage easement.
Yeah. Yeah, the intention is not to just bulldoze them. Yeah, we like trees.
Right, I just wanted to address what the lady had addressed earlier.
Yeah.
Brian, could you address the question about Reserve D and its
Yes,
uses?
Reserve D, I should have brought my magnifying glass, but I didn't print a bigger one. But Reserve D, let's see here. Reserve D, there's a list of things that are already, I'll read you all the things that are listed for Reserve D. So open space, berms, landscaping, irrigation, signs, monuments, fencing, walls, lighting, cross-lot drainage, utilities confined by platted easement or otherwise separate instrument. Reserve D is also platted for a private neighborhood amenities, swimming pool, pool house, including but not limited to playgrounds, sport court, shade structures, gazebos, and neighborhood gardens. So, and that's all being maintained by the homeowners association. So we do think about how this will work, and you know, it's not a large neighborhood. It's 49 lots. So kind of scale it accordingly.
Okay. Any more questions of Brian?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's fine. Go ahead. Go up if you want to state your name and your address. That'd be great.
So Dan Day at 916 East Woodstone in Crescent Lakes. So obviously I'm just a layman here trying to figure all this stuff out with everybody else. So y'all have been doing it for a while, so appreciate it. And I know you put a lot of thought into all of this. So what's being considered here exactly at the meeting? What cannot be considered? What can be considered at this meeting? Or you're just taking in information at this point, or are there any decisions that you're not making decisions through this meeting, or you are?
Well, there's a plan unit development that's being proposed,
Okay.
the preliminary and the final.
So it's not 100% that it has to be this way on this plan at this point?
Want to speak to that, Les?
You're considering a final, I guess, is what.
Sure. The item in front of the planning commission at this moment is the preliminary planned unit development that establishes the zoning for the parcel. And being a planned unit development, any exceptions to the standards for that zoning district that are in the Unified Development Manual.
I think I got it. So obviously some of the concern here is how different the homes are going to be versus existing Crescent Lakes homes. And, you know, I know we need variety in the city and all that kind of stuff. Totally agree with that. It's just, does it have to be right here, butting right up against these other Crescent Lakes homes? That seems like should be more consistency through that. You know, don't mind, I mean, patio homes in other spaces and all that kind of, I totally understand that there's a need for lots of different ways to have homes. But the difference between these and why, so why they need the 65% coverage when everybody else has the 35, and why we just can't keep them the same and keep them similar. I think it's just that's just part of our concern. And yes, the landowners taking on the risk of these homes won't sell, but we also take on the risk of these homes won't sell. I mean, because if they sit on the market for that long and the price goes down and all this kind of stuff because they sit on the market so long, it does affect us. So I do appreciate, I mean, having owned businesses myself, yes, you take on some risk, but there's also others around you that take on that risk with you when you're considering these kind of things, which is why we even consider these kind of things. So that's just something for you guys to think about and enjoy, that Andover's expanding. It's great, but just some of the thoughts. So
Thank you.
I have a quick question for you.
Dan, I have a question for you.
yes.
You mentioned the 65%. What bothers you about that?
Because from what I understand, it sounds like the homes are going to be really close to each other. We're moving everything in 2 feet, and there just doesn't seem like there's going to be that same kind of nice space between homes. And it's I guess it's going to feel a lot more like, when I hear patio homes, I think of what's right over here, which they're all very, very close. And sounds like from what I understand, it seems like that's where we're going to be getting.
I think we're comparing apples and oranges here.
These are going to be bigger homes.
The lots that we're comparing in Heritage are from 4,000 square feet down as low as 3,400 square feet. This Vista Ridge proposal, these lots are well over 10,000 square feet. They're actually, some of them, larger lots than the adjacent lots in Crescent Lake. So I think our perception is when we hear the word patio home, we're talking about a small house on a small lot. When in this case, this would allow some very large houses on lots that are comparable size.
Are you talking about large patio homes?
Yes.
Which I'm
So
familiar
So
with.
and I always ask people,
So
just what does patio home mean to you?
All it means is it doesn't have a basement.
Maintenance
No
free.
basement, yeah.
It
No
might
basement,
not have a basement, it
less-
might have a basement.
Right.
Patio home typically means common maintenance. And that's about the only defining
Mhm.
factor. This is not a high density residential product.
When you got patio homes in the waterfront for 1.5 million. Yeah.
What's the age? I mean, patio homes, because you're right, it's that whole age. Patio homes more for like older folks that they don't need the steps. You know what I mean? Where it's like flat into your house type of house.
I think I would personally say generally that's the case, but I don't know if it will be in the covenants. Will it state 55 plus or probably not?
I guess, help us understand that. Yes, the patio home thing. Because like I said, I didn't know there was $1 million patio homes over in
Oh, yeah.
Waterfront or whatever. So,
Oh, more
Flint
than that.
Hills is full of them.
and so, yeah, so you can speak to kind of what they're
They're not
anticipating.
rinky dink.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I know what they had to pay for this land, and it costs a ton to do. They can't be doing $200,000 patio homes here. I mean, I can't speak for the developer. I don't even know who it is, but I can't imagine these are going to be less than 400 or 500. I don't know. Maybe Brian, you could speak to it.
Yeah, what's the price point?
I'm not even gonna try to guess
Probably
what the
north of
price is
that.
gonna be. I mean, but it's gonna be probably comparable what's in the neighborhood, right? I'll just point out a couple more distinctions of what a patio home. You're talking about an EPCON community. Those lots are 6 foot apart. These are gonna be double that, minimum double that. That just because we have a minimum of 6 doesn't mean that everybody's gonna build on 6. We wanted that flexibility to have some variation in architecture, and sometimes you need more driveway, you need more of a garage. So I just wanted to maybe point that out that those are completely a different product. Those are 6 foot between the houses, not 6 foot between the property lines. So this is double that. at minimum, it's a double that. And so what you're talking about is a difference of 16 feet versus 12 feet. I mean, it's not, we're not, from what's in the code versus what our PUD allows for. It's not a very large departure. I know this isn't a great example, but Flint Hills, we worked on that project. There are patio homes out there. Those are on, I'm assuming, more than $1 million patio homes. So, and there's a large number of them too. So it's not as though, just a small number of them, but those have the 32-foot right of way. So I don't want people to get hung up on the word patio home. The fact is, it's a single family resident. There was some ideas that what kind of house are they going to make? Well, it might be a patio home development. So that's what we know today.
So Les, you were saying the lot sizes are as small as 3,500 in Heritage. Is that right? 4 to
Yes,
3,500?
and those are 0 lot lines, which
Well, those are
means
really
that-
close
that
together.
A house is adjacent to one property line with a 6-foot setback to its neighbor. 6 feet between dwellings, as Brian said, not 6 feet to the property line, which means a minimum of 12 feet between houses.
Mhm.
I think, again, we're trying to compare apples and oranges.
Well, and the biggest lot here is 21,800 square feet.
What's that?
That could be yours if you want.
As long as it's cheap.
Yeah.
There's enough room
I
for
am an accountant.
So one thought of I'll just go back to the 65% coverage. One of the ideas in that is obviously to give us a lot of flexibility on architecture and the way the house fits on the lot. The other thought process too is, accessory structures like, pool houses and things of that sort. This would cover that as well.
Sure,
So
that's true.
it's just less coming back to the drawing board, if you will, if we just bake it into the product from the get-go. And that's probably the simplest way to put it is we're trying to give ourselves flexibility for what the customer wants.
Right, and just for the public, a lot of times we have people come before us that want to build a pool house or a pool or a bigger garage or whatever. If that 35%'s there, then they have to come before us and request that additional space.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, and we do
All the
that.
time.
We do that all the time.
We had one in Flint Hills last month,
Yeah, we had a couple at
Central.
Flint Hills last couple months.
all the time.
But, 65% actually prevents that from having to come back to us every time somebody wants to expand.
In the
Other
fr-
than the permits,
Yeah, the other thing I'd mention also is the front building setbacks are not reduced. They're 25 feet, same as the rest of the development in Crescent Lakes, if you will. So, again, it's very similar things here. So appreciate any additional comments, but, or questions from me, but.
Thank you. I think I had one more. If you would come up and state your name and address, that'd be great.
Tacey Contreras, 1110 East Woodstone Drive. So as I'm understanding it, there's a preliminary and a final decision kind of going for this. It does feel like there's a lot of unknowns, such as minimum square footage of a house. I don't know how any of this works. But something that struck me was the comments around the hedgerow that exists today on the east side of Crescent Lakes. There's also one to the north. We had a hearing or an HOA meeting a few months back, and it was discussed that those hedgerows were protected by the Crescent Lakes covenants or PUD at that time. I don't know if that's in writing somewhere. I haven't actually seen that. I understood the drainage comments around landscaping and whatnot, but the comment that we don't intend to touch the trees bothers me if that is not actually the case, that those trees are actually subject to being removed as part of this. So I would ask that you really consider, or at least some clarity on if that really is owned by Crescent Lakes or owned by the new developer would be helpful.
Thank you.
Vance, I could comment to that. I know there is some text in the Crescent Lakes PUD that does protect that perimeter hedgerow. And unfortunately, as is typical in Kansas, that hedgerow is on the property line. So oftentimes it's owned by both parties. Those trees may very well be split down the middle by a property line.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Lisa?
Me again, Lisa Land. I want to thank you for the conversation we've had. I've learned a lot about what it means to be a patio home. I would just say to the Planning Commission, as the next door neighbor to this development, Crescent Lakes has been asking for what's the status of this development for the last 2 years. And I personally felt blindsided by the fact that that there was a meeting that had already talked about a preliminary at this level of detail, and that we've got a final up for consideration tonight. That as the neighbor directly impacted, we hadn't had a chance to have this conversation and to learn more about what this was, is that we had to come here to get this level of detail. So thank you for your time today to do that. And my only desire would be that we would have been able to have done it earlier.
Sure. We always try to, how far ahead of time is all this stuff posted for the meetings?
Ma'am,
It's usually,
I got one question for you. Did you receive a notice in the mail?
No,
Do you live within 200 feet?
no.
Okay.
What is that? Sorry.
So
Are
We're-
the 200 feet,
we're required,
200 feet, is that the 11 houses that border?
yes, essentially, yeah. We're required by law to notify everyone within 200 feet of a zoning case. Those notices would have gone out at least 20 days prior to this hearing. We didn't have an application to advertise until a month ago. It's not like we've known anything about this subdivision for some time. We receive an application, we mail out notices to the neighbors. The subdivision committee meets 1 week before the planning commission. They met last week and talked about this, and we're here tonight for that public hearing that was
and
advertised.
all the subdivision documents are always posted too,
They're all online on our
all online for
website.
everybody. And
All of
the land was just purchased last year, right?
The closing on this land was late last year, like
Right.
December.
it hasn't
this
been,
is- This is not something that
It's not been in the works for 2
we,
years.
as staff, have known about any details until there was an application about a month ago.
There's been this nebulous Yorktown Parkway coming for 2 years and nothing has happened. You know, we have people that are in the business that are watching for when is the Yorktown going to be put out for bid. And, you know, it's just like nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happened. And then all of a sudden, we've got this level of detail and these kind of lot sizes. And it seems like 0 to 50.
I've
and
presented
nothing.
to your HOA twice on Yorktown Parkway myself.
You did, Les, and you didn't have this level of detail. And that's what I'm just saying, as we're asking questions and learning, what does it mean to have patio homes as our next door neighbors? We didn't know. So tonight was our only chance to learn.
Sure. I think what Les is saying is that staff didn't know either. And if staff doesn't know, we sure don't know. You know, we're all community members or within the ETJ. Like I live just outside the city limits. So does Dave. Everyone else here is in the city limits. And our planning commission has to be that way. It's 5 members in the city limits and 2 in the ETJ. And so we rely a ton on staff as well. Yes, sir.
Bob Land, 615 East Crescent Lakes Drive. Thanks, guys, and all the work's been going into this. Question and a comment. If the lots planning, you know, there are a few lots in there that in the cul-de-sac that are always at a lot of extra square footage. That's,
useless square footage, but it's there in a lot. So when you look at your basic square rectangle lot, those are smaller lots. So I just want to make that point, that they're not equal lots to what's in Crescent Lakes. Also, the houses that are that's going to be bordering on the east and bordering on the north, those are $600,000 homes. We've lived in 2 or 3 different places, and we've always taught our kids to think past the moment. I've gone back to and visited places that we've lived at 20 years later in instances like this, where you've had, at the time, probably $500,000 homes, 200,000 homes, $200,000 homes went into them, next to them, in a very similar situation to this. 20 years later, $200,000 homes, that neighborhood is not nearly as well maintained as more expensive neighborhoods. So I've got a question, and I don't understand the process here, so help me understand. If this development plan gets approved, does the builder who actually comes in and is going to be presenting plans to build on, do they have to come to you guys? And we have meetings like this discussing what is a patio home, how much square footage are they actually doing, what's the, it's, so is the developer going to be coming back to you guys, to this committee?
You want to speak to that, Les? You're probably best.
No, we're talking about land use only here at the Planning Commission. This is about single-family homes adjacent to single-family homes. The house plans are up to the builder and the developer to develop.
Okay, so we as governing body, you as a governing body's got absolutely no say what goes in there.
Just
That
like,
tells, that to me is not right.
it's just as in Crescent Lakes, there are $200,000 houses in the original phase and $600,000 houses in the latter phases.
And you're correct. And if this development would be placed next to the original part of Crescent Lakes that's 30 years old now, 25 years old, whatever it is, it wouldn't be nearly as an impact on future property values as it is if something comes in that's 1/2 to 1/3 the value of what they're bordering up to. That's my only concern here is, and I understand that, thanks for the clarification of the 65% helping to do that, but that also still tells me that there's going to be a lot of concrete on a smaller lot. And so not quite sure how that's going to work out, but anyways, I'm just concerned. I'm still just at a loss that the actual developer doesn't have to come to you guys and say, this is the type of homes that I'm looking at doing. To me, that just makes no sense.
So Bob, did somebody tell you what you had to build for a house?
No.
Okay,
Because I didn't build it myself.
okay. So my $200,000 house is a stone throw from, what is it, Shadow Rock? $800,000 houses. They built their house next to my house. They decided what they wanted to do, and they said, hey, we're okay building next to your little $200,000 house.
Gary, that's fine. Because we lived in Anchorage, Alaska for 17 years. And they had zero city planning for decades. And you would have that example right there. You'd have just a lean-to on a lean-to on a lean-to sitting next to a $600,000 home. But we're talking about planned communities here. We're talking about you guys being, we've got this committee. So that's the issue. Do we have any say to whether this development that goes in has to have a HOA?
to help govern,
No, those are
No.
okay.
private rights.
And that's fine. that was just the informational question. I don't know. So like I said, the other times I've traveled back to places we've lived at 15 years later. Some of those places had a lot of cars up on jacks, a lot of oil spots in the driveway. And we lived in Crescent Lakes now for what, 3.5 years? We looked all over this side of town when we moved back. And everything kind of kept coming back to Crescent Lakes. We decided we're too old to buy a new home out in the middle of the wheat field that's, we were going to be waiting on trees to grow. And everything came back to Crescent Lakes. And so we just want to protect our property value. We want to protect everyone else's value, especially those guys on the eastern border and the northern border of this subdivision. I do not want to see $200,000 little bitty homes going up next to $500,000-$600,000 homes. It just makes no sense. There needs to be a transition of home values. So anyways, thanks so much, guys, for.
No, thanks for coming.
Okay.
All right. Yes, sir. State your name and address, please.
Scott Sexton, 2020 East Lotus. Just to let you all know right up front, I don't live in Crescent Lakes. I love Crescent Lakes. I just come here because I like government. I like this. As a unbiased party in this, I don't have a horse in this race. Is it too much to ask to table the approval of this until the builder is able to come up with the covenants and everyone says, hey, the covenants is, yes, this is great. Like I said, I have no horse in this race, but I'm just trying to mediate here.
The covenants, the size of the house, the materials of the house are not a decision that the planning commission can make.
Yeah.
Their decision tonight is strictly about land use. And we're looking at two products that are very similar. The lot sizes are similar. They're both single family homes. They both have reserves for open space. They both have space for a clubhouse for their residents. They're very similar. It all boils down to that word patio.
And like you said, I've seen some amazing patio
Yeah,
homes.
I would live in
honestly.
a patio house home.
I have to. Like I said, I was just throwing that out there as a possible mediation. Like I said, I have no horse in this race. I love all of y'all.
Kevin Mears, 1006 Woodstone. Basically, you guys are saying that this is going to be zoned for residential.
Right.
Single, that's great. So what MKC is presenting, you can say, okay, it's going to be residential. They can come back and change everything on that now after you guys approved it to a different residential plot or outlet. So
No.
what's up there, what they're proposing, you guys say, yeah, that's what it's going to be. No, they don't get to decide how big your house is going to be, but that is residential. Those are the lot size.
Right.
That's the drainage.
Right.
That's all the amenities.
They'd have to come back for other approval.
Right.
And that happens a lot, all the time.
If they want to tweak it and
Right.
stuff, but they're not going to come in and say, okay, scrap this. Let's come in with some double wides all through the whole
No.
thing because it's going to be on those plots.
Right.
What you see is what you get.
There you go. That's what I wanted to get. Thank you.
And it has been reviewed by city staff, by engineering groups. It's been reviewed by the fire department, the police department. It's had a lot of reviews.
And we spoke with the fire department and staff and everybody else in a meeting last week on this same issue, on these same three issues. And so we cover this extensively, and staff does a great job of going through every single little particular thing that these have to adhere to before it even comes to us here tonight. And I can tell you from my experience of 20 or 30 years as a developer's accountant, both commercial and residential, that none of my developers are going in here and building $200,000 homes in a situation like this. So you know, although there's no guarantee what kind of house is going to be built on which lot, we're just here to approve the function of the land. And if they want to do anything else with that land,
You have to come back.
they have to come back. So, and secondly, I do appreciate this back and forth, give and take. I think everybody feels a little bit better about it by doing that, and that's why we're here.
I can't imagine these lots are gonna cost less than $75,000. I mean, by the time you put what they had to pay for the dirt and everything else going into it, so there are not, I'm not the developer, but you can't build a $200,000 house. You can't have a $200,000 property. It would be a tent if you're paying 75 for a lot. So I personally can't fathom any of these are gonna be less than 400 or 500 and probably a lot more. And if you've got a lot that's 10 or 11,000 square feet, even a little smaller, and you got 40% lot coverage or 45%, you're building a 2,500 square foot house times 200 is 500 grand just for the house. So I'm not a builder, not a developer. I talk about it a fair amount with other people that do. Yeah, one more comment, then we got to move on. Yes,
Sorry.
Dan.
Again, thank you for the discussion and doing all this, because we have a whole group of people behind us asking questions,
course.
right? Our neighbors are coming to us like, what's going on? So we're just here to,
Yeah.
this is great information to know that, oh, okay, well then, yeah, if the lot is, I feel a whole lot better about that. If the lot is probably going to be less than $75,000, you're not putting a
No,
200 and something. So again, this is stuff we don't know. So,
right, yeah.
and I know you guys got it all covered, and you send
I don't
out
know, we do.
notices-
We
You
do
send
our
out
best.
notices, and you've got I got a 165-page document I'm looking at here on my phone, but most people aren't reading that, right?
Yeah.
So we just got to give them the nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
what exactly is going on, and
Yeah.
not to get overly worried and
No,
all those kind of
I
things.
get
So we're
it.
just thank you for the answers.
I appreciate it. I do appreciate all of you for coming. We've got a tough balance between making sure that you guys are protected and then also understanding what the comprehensive plan for the city calls for, which is more housing units. I'm not saying it calls for patio homes, but these are options for single family homes. So I understand. Les, did you just unmute or mute? I couldn't tell. Do you want to talk or not talk? Not talk. Okay. All right. Did council have anything? We still don't have Marla, do we? She's quiet. That's okay. That's
She
fine.
fell asleep.
Okay. All right. Have any written communications been received? No? Applicant, any final comments? Anything? No? It's all been beat dead? Okay, okay. Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The planning commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation.
Want me to read those?
What's that?
You want me to read those?
That'd be great if someone would.
Okay. Staff items, do adequate sewage disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the change in zoning were approved? Staff comments that public facilities are in place and adequate or could be readily extended to serve the property. Number two, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide needed right-of-ways, easements, building setback lines, or access control? Staff comments that the subject property would need to be platted during the PUD process. Number three, If the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff comments that because the surrounding properties are either used for agricultural, not annexed to Andover, or zoned SF-2, a screening plan would not be required. 4, would what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff comments that they've received none at this time. Number 5, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the errors? Staff comments that no error is known to exist. Number 6, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? Staff comments the property is suitable for its current zoning
Concur.
and would concur. Number 7, is the length of time the subject property has been vacant or undeveloped under its current zoning a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, yes, the development of Yorktown Parkway adjacent to the site is a considerable factor in the request for change from agricultural to suburban residential uses.
Concur.
Number 7, hold on, I'm making a note here. Number 8, how reasonable, well-suited will the requested zoning change of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, the requested zoning change is well-suited to the current zoning of nearby properties. It would be consistent with the adjacent SF2 subdivision. Concur. Number 9, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these changes? Staff, yes, the development of Yorktown Parkway adjacent to the site is a considerable factor in the request for change from agricultural to suburban residential uses. Housing demand has continued to increase, and this development would provide more options to potential home buyers.
Concur.
Number 10, what are the current land uses, character, and conditions of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the current land uses to the west are similar in character and condition. A similar request is in process for the property adjacent to the east. Concur.
Concur.
Number 11, would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses which might have a detrimental effect on nearby properties, and if so, how? Staff, the proposed use will increase the traffic, lighting, activity, etc. over the current vacant lot, but can be mitigated during the final PUD and planning steps of development.
Concur.
Number 12, how would the requested zoning change conform with the city's comprehensive plan or other adopted master plans and policies? Staff, the comprehensive plan suggests a traditional neighborhood place type, which is consistent with the applicant's proposal.
Concur.
Do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect this zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in its evaluation? Staff supports the proposed zoning change.
Concur.
And number 14, how would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff, no detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare is perceived. Any changes in light, traffic, or noise can be sufficiently mitigated with adequate screening and buffering.
Concur.
Concur.
Thank you, Gary. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our finding of fact, I would remind the commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it's based. And if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modification and approval, disapproval, or to table the discussion? You got some facts, Gary?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I need to get down here. Okay. Having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Gary Israel, move that we recommend to the governing body that case number Z-PUD 25-003 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings number 7, 8, 9, and 12 as recorded in the summary of this hearing.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Clint Tyner will second.
Second by Clint. We have a motion for approval and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Actually, all those, nay? Any nay? No, motion passes. The case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at the regular meeting of March 11th, 2025. The recording of this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after the final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed at the commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the city clerk for 14 days after tonight. That'd be March 4th, 2025. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal description from the owners of record of 20% or more of the real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public streets, right-of-way, or public statutorily excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council. I just want to say I appreciate all of you coming. What's that? Sorry, sir. Oh, well, go ahead, Gary.
Well, and based on what the chairperson just read, you all have the opportunity to sign a petition that would go to city council with your objections, and then the city council would have to listen to what's going on and they would make the final decision. We're just deciding tonight if this is appropriate land use that the applicant has requested.
Just a question back. Don McGill, 1105 East Woodstone Drive, Crescent Lake. Did y'all just approve the preliminary and the final?
No, just the preliminary.
Yeah, the final is coming up.
Okay, and it would not be possible to postpone the final for a month? What I heard Les say is that we didn't receive this application until I believe December, and it's been quite quickly moved through, as people have alluded to, so would it hurt to postpone the final for a month?
That's very typical of the process. The preliminary PUD, the zoning component, has a minimum of 30 days in advance for staff to review, subdivision committee to review. The final only requires 15, so it's actually on a much quicker turnaround. And that applicant is within his rights to present that final tonight. It's been reviewed by our subdivision committee. It essentially just puts on paper the lines that create the lots and blocks of this new subdivision that look exactly like the preliminary.
Doesn't it also include all the exceptions that you've called out?
Those are all called out in the preliminary planned unit development, and they'll also be reflected on the final PUD. So it's, like I say, you get what you see here tonight.
And Les, again, the individuals in Crescent Lake, those that are within the 200 square or 200 foot, have the opportunity to go before city council and provide a petition of their grievances, correct?
Correct. That petition is by those who were notified,
Yeah.
not
Not
those
everybody
outside
in
of
Crescent
the-
Lake.
Correct, correct.
100 feet is the law, yeah.
Yeah. But even if we do approve the final PUD, the individuals that would be affected in that 200-foot range would have the opportunity to address their grievances with city council.
We recommend the land use and the actual approval, city council. Yeah. Well, again, I appreciate all of you coming. You brave the roads and you appreciate that you guys care. Thank you very much. And nothing was thrown, so that's great. Well, let's move on to agenda item 5.3, which is a public hearing on case Z-PUD 25-0002. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have any conflicts of interest.
No.
Oh,
None. I now call upon the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I think we've hashed this out, that this is the final PUD. The plat of the subdivision establishes the lots and blocks, establishes the uses of the reserves, and dedicates to the public any easements and rights of way for the final PUD plan as depicted.
Okay,
Again,
thank you.
Brian Lindeback is here on behalf of the applicant.
Do you have anything additional to say?
I don't think so, but I can certainly answer any questions you might have related to the final PUD. It's virtually copy paste.
Right.
So that's partly why we did
Yeah.
it the way we did it, is because it wasn't rocket science here. It's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
yeah, in your final PUD, you are specifying in the reserves what things might be in those
Exactly.
reserves.
Exactly.
Okay. And then that's up to the developer, what he'd like to put in there.
Yep. Just like any other plat. Yeah.
Okay.
Neither I nor the committee have any authority at all, but it'd be great if someone wanted to attend the Crescent Lakes HOA and relay this to people. I mean, you guys can relay it, I think, great. I'm not the guy to do it, but I would just say that. Anybody else? Questions, Brian? Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. All right, any other public comments that haven't been said that would like to be discussed? No? Okay. You can. I'm not going to say no. I want to hear you. All right, any written communications been received?
No, sir.
Okay, I assume the applicant has no further comment? Okay, hearing no further public comment, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions, clarify information. Planning Commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation.
This is the final PUD. We don't go through that 14
That's
question
right. That's right,
exercise.
we don't. I was already scrolling for it. So we just need a motion then.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion to approve the Vista Ridge First Edition final PUD plan and recommend that the governing body accept the dedications.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion for approval. We have a second.
I'll second Clint Tyner.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Again, I appreciate everybody for coming. I know I said it already, but I appreciate you coming. All right. Move on to item 5.4. There we go. I now call
Aye.
agenda. We got Marla now? All right. I now call it agenda item 5.4, which is public hearing on a case number BZA-V25-0001. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have conflicts of interest.
No.
Anybody? No.
No,
I now call on the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
the preliminary PUD in front of you is for the remainder of that 80 acres less a 10-acre tract adjacent to Central Avenue. Again, single-family residential developments. This subdivision is more of the typical street configuration and street widths. It does ask for a reduction in the side yards to 6 feet, which seems to be a trend lately that they're asking for lesser side yard setbacks. The lot sizes in this subdivision are as small as 8,500 square feet, but average the 10,000 square feet mark that we've discussed on the previous case. Other than that, it's a very typical single-family residential subdivision. Lot sizes are very similar throughout this subdivision and would compare to other subdivisions around the city in the SF2 single-family zone.
And let's just so that the public knows, this is a completely different developer, correct?
Yes, this is a different landowner and a different engineer preparing the plan.
Any more questions of Les?
No.
I now call upon the applicant to make his presentation.
Evening, Phil Meyer with Boffman Company, agent for the applicant. I don't know that I have much of a presentation for you on this thing. So like Les said, this is a different developer doing this. 8,400 is our smallest lot size. We average 10,000 square foot on all the lots. A little different. It's not a patio home market. It's more of a standard residential subdivision. With that, I will stand and answer any questions you guys may have.
Single-family homes?
Single-family homes. Yes, sir.
Okay. I know we reviewed this in the subdivision committee. And I know one of the issues I had was, whether the fire department was in agreement with what you've presented. And that was mentioned in subdivision that yes,
Yes.
they had approved it.
Yes.
The only outstanding item from the subdivision committee was some revisions to the drainage plan. We did receive those after that meeting, and the city engineer has reviewed and is agreeable to the drainage plan as revised.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the public that would like to speak on this case? We lost a lot of our crowd. Any written communication been received?
No, sir.
No final comment, I assume, from the applicant? Okay. Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the board wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The board will now deliberate the request to determine whether the evidence presented supports the conclusions of the required findings of fact. The board will now consider the criteria provided for evaluation.
Would you like me to read those, Mr. Chairman?
If someone would, that'd be great.
You could see them. Okay, staff items. To adequate sewer disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the change in zoning were approved? Staff, public facilities are in place and adequate or could be readily extended to serve the property. Number two, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide needed rights of way, easements, building setback lines, or access control? Staff, the subject property would need to be platted during the PUD process. If the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff, because the surrounding properties are either used for agriculture, not annexed in Andover, or zoned SF2, a screening plan would not be required. Number four, what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff, none at this time. Number five, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? Staff, no error is known to exist. Number six, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? Staff, the property is suitable for its current zoning. Would concur.
Concur.
Number seven, is the length of time the subject property has been vacant or undeveloped under its current zoning a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, yes, the development of Yorktown Parkway adjacent to the site has changed the area. The property is now better suited for suburban residential development.
Concur.
Number eight, making notes again. How reasonably well-suited will the requested zoning change to the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, the requested zoning change is well-suited to the current zoning of nearby properties. It would be consistent with the adjacent SF2 development.
Concur.
Concur.
Subdivision. Concur. Number nine, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these conditions? Staff, the development of Yorktown Parkway adjacent to the site has changed the area. The property is now better suited for suburban residential development. Housing demand has continued to increase, and this development would provide more options for potential home buyers.
Concur.
Number 10, what are the current land uses, character, and conditions of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the current land uses in the area are similar in character and condition. Concur. Number 11, would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses which might have detrimental effects on nearby properties, and if so, how? Staff, the proposed use will increase the traffic, light, activity, etc. over the current vacant lot, but can be mitigated during the final PUD and platting steps of development. Concur. Number 12, how would the requested zoning change conform with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted master plans and policies? Staff, the comprehensive plan suggests a traditional neighborhood place type, which is consistent with the applicant's proposal. Concur.
Concur.
Number 13, do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect this zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in its evaluation? Staff supports this proposed zoning change. Concur.
Concur.
And number 14, how would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff, no detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare is perceived. Any change in light, traffic, or noise can be significantly mitigated with adequate screening and buffering.
Concur.
Concur.
Having discussed and reached conclusions on our finding of fact, I'd remind the commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it's based. And if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modify an approval, disapproval, or table the discussion? I think I could probably make this one. Unless you want to, Peter. Go for it. Go for it.
Having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Peter Fox, move that we recommend to the governing body that case number Z PUD 25-0002 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings 6, 8, 10, and 12, as recorded in the summary of this hearing.
I, Gary Yissel, second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. This case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at the regular meeting of March 11, 2025. Recording this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after the final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed at the Commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the city clerk for 14 days after tonight, which is March 4th, 2025 at 4:30 p.m. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public street rights of way or specific statutorily excluded property, then such a change should not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion to recess the Planning Commission and convene the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Dave Foley.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of recessing the Planning Commission and convene the Board of Zoning and Appeals, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right. Motion passes. Let's move on to item 5.5. This. Have we done this before? One time? We've done this before? This statement, the outro, they call it? Is that right? Do you recognize this? It must. You said before opening Board of Zoning Appeals. Do you guys recognize that? That would be now. Just doesn't seem like it fits.
No.
I know.
You did that. Your closing remarks.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, just want to make sure I wasn't off. That happens. All right, let's move on to 5.5 then, which is the variance at the 1735 South Lantern Lane. Okay. Okay. There, I'm getting caught up now. Okay, very good. And it's actually 5.5, I guess. I think it says 5.4. Should we get there? Sorry, everybody. Okay. I now call agenda item 5.4, which is a public hearing on case number BZA-V25-0001. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have any conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
I now call upon the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, this is a very common variance case. The applicant desires to construct a accessory building that exceeds the maximums for the zoning district and exceeds the maximum as compared to the size of the principal dwelling. Notice has been sent. We're at the public hearing stage. This is very commonplace for this committee. We hear them just about every month. As a matter of fact, we're going to address that when we take a look at our Unified Development Manual this year and try to loosen these standards up a little bit and perhaps make them more of a ratio of lot area to maximum accessory structure. But nonetheless, here we are to hear a variance for this larger accessory structure.
Thanks, Les. Any questions of Les? Not yet. And I'll call upon the applicant. If you'd like to come up and state your name and address.
David Sanger, 1735 Lantern Lane Court. I appreciate Les and the staff's preparation of the documents. I was looking over that today, and I've read the regulation, so I think we're well within that. Les may have mentioned that we actually received our permit. We had our inspections for our plumbing and our electrical and our footings. We've poured the slab, and now we've just been waiting. We got notified. We received that probably in the middle of January, and so there's been quite a delay. We are running up against suppliers not even wanting to hold on to the materials any longer. Some of them have dropped it off on site, and so I wanted to come tonight just to find out, after tonight, how long approximately is our wait going to be before we can get going?
The Board of Zoning Appeals is a board of final action, so the resolution that approves this variance is laying in front of the chairman for his signature should they choose to approve it.
Excellent. Very good. That's all I was hoping. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Any questions of the applicant?
And we apologize in this case. We found a glitch in our building permitting software that allows inspections to be scheduled before the permit was approved by all the reviewers.
I see.
Mr. Sanger, in the packet, there's an aerial view of your property, and it looks like there's already a little structure. Is that being removed? Or?
It is not. That will be behind the structure that's being built.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you'll have your home, this new structure, and that other.
Yes.
What is that other little structure?
It's a shed. I think it's a 250 square foot shed. And this is going to be a little over 1,300 square foot shop and an area for weight room and that kind of stuff inside of it.
Okay. Yeah, because we've had some applicants who've come in, they've had one or two sheds and they're going to demolish those and replace it with their new structure.
Yeah.
You're putting a fitness room in it?
I am.
Oh, I'm building a barn now. I'm doing the same thing.
Are you? Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
Looking, years and years of wanting to do this exact structure. And so it's finally going to happen. So
Good for you.
yeah, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for the applicant? Oh, what's the exterior going to look like?
It's going to match the home. So it's going to be the siding to match the current structure.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Nope.
Oh,
None.
appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You had to wait a while tonight.
Great learning experience.
It was something.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great. Should have been here when we get back here. Any members of the public that want to speak? Nope. All right. They might hold you back if you want to.
I approve of this man's message.
Okay. Sound like a politician. Any written communication been received? No. I assume the applicant doesn't have any final comments. You're good to go. Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the board wishes to ask questions, clarify information. The board will now deliberate the request to determine whether the evidence presented supports the conclusions of the required finding of fact. The board will now consider the criteria provided for evaluation. I bet I could do these if I can find them.
You got 9.
Here we go. I can do these. My voice is holding out. Does the evidence demonstrate that 1, the physical surrounding shape or topography of the property would result in a practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience for the owner, lessee, or occupant? Staff, the property is over 3 times the minimum lot area required for the underlying zoning district. The proportion of unused land would be well within the maximum lot coverage, even with the requested structure. 2, granting the variance will result in material detriment or injury to other property or improvements in the neighborhood. Staff, no detriment and/or injury to other property or improvements is anticipated.
Concur.
3. 3, granting the variance will result in an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property, substantially increased traffic congestion, increased fire risk, or substantially diminished property values in the neighborhood. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
4, the request for a variance is not based exclusively on a desire of the owner, lessee, occupant, or applicant to make more money out of the property. Staff, the applicant does not have a motivation to make money out of the property through the request of this variance. It is to allow a structure to be used as a garage shop.
Concur.
Specific conditions to be met. 1, the requested variance arises from a condition unique to the property in question, which is not ordinarily found in the same zoning district, which is not created by any action of the property owner or the applicant. Staff, the subject property is generally larger than the comparable SF2 housing sites. Comparing it to a smaller lot that might comply with the 300 square foot maximum for accessory structures, it would have a comparable impact on the maximum lot coverage as what is being requested.
Concur.
2, strict application of the provisions of these zoning regulations would result in unnecessary hardship for the owner, lessee, or occupant of the land or structures. Staff, strict application of the provisions in this case would result in some unnecessary hardship for the owner given the size of the lot and what is being requested.
Concur.
3, granting the variance will not adversely affect the rights of the adjacent property owners or residents. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
4, the requested variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
5, the requested variance will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of those zoning regulations because the requested variance would still allow the subject property to comply with the maximum lot coverage specified for this zoning district in the bulk regulations. It is not in opposition to the general spirit and intent of the zoning regulations.
Concur.
Concur.
I do have one question for Mrs. Sanger. Did you talk to your neighbor about building this? Just out of courtesy, to your neighbor?
So my neighbor has a structure of very similar size in their backyard, and the one across the street also has one very similar size.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I figured your neighbor would probably say, "What are you building over there?"
The young neighbors right next door, I did let them know of our intentions. So they were.
Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to either approve, modify and approve, disapprove, or table discussion?
Mr. Chairperson, having considered the evidence at the hearing and determined that the findings of facts have been found that support all 5 conditions set in subsection 11-106, point B2 of the zoning regulations and KSA 12-759E, I, Gary Israel, move that the chairperson be authorized to sign a resolution granting the variance for BZA-V25-0001.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Gary and a second by Peter. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. A resolution will be prepared and made available to the applicant as soon as reasonably possible, but no later than 45 days from the date of this hearing. If anyone's aggrieved by this decision, a further appeal can be made to the district court to determine its reasonableness within 30 days after the resolution is signed and filed with the zoning administrator.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that we adjourn the Board of Zoning Appeals and reconvene the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
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 Member items? Thanks for coming.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the
Very good.
Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals.
Very good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Gary, second by Peter. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Very good.
Yeah, I worked in a lady. Just because I don't like the fact what I'm saying? I was actually hoping to